Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
All right, guys, today we are diving into something that affects way more of us than we might realize. Generational trauma. Now, I know that might sound like heavy therapy talk, but stick with me because here's the thing. You know those patterns you keep noticing in your family, the way everyone seems to struggle with the same things, generation after generation. The anxiety that runs through your family tree like it's genetic. The communication styles that just feel broken. That's what we're talking about today. And more importantly, we're talking about how to break those cycles. How to be the one who says, this stops with me. So grab your coffee, get comfy, and let's talk about healing, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that came before us and the ones that come after. All right, so first things first, what actually is generational trauma? In the simplest terms, it's the emotional and psychological wounds that get passed down through families. It's trauma that doesn't just affect the person who experienced it. It ripples out and touches their children, their grandchildren, sometimes even further down the line. And here's what makes it so tricky. The people passing it down usually have no idea they're doing it. Your grandmother who survived a war and never talked about it. Your parent who grew up in poverty and can't stop hoarding things just in case. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're just carrying wounds they never learned how to heal. Scientists have actually found that trauma can affect us on a biological level. There's fascinating research and basically how our experiences can actually change which genes get turned on or off. And those changes can be passed to our kids, like Holocaust survivors, descendants of enslaved people, children of refugees. Researchers have found measurable differences in stress hormones and trauma responses that span generations. But it's not just biological. Most of generational trauma gets transmitted through learned behaviors, beliefs, and coping mechanisms. Your parent learned to handle stress a certain way from their parent, and then you learned it from them. It becomes the water you swim in, so familiar you don't even notice it's there. So, some common signs of generational trauma include unexplained anxiety or depression that seems to run in families, difficulty trusting others or forming secure attachments, patterns of addiction, self-sabotage or destructive relationships, extreme responses to stress that seem bigger than the situation warrants, family secrets and unspoken rules about what you can and can't talk about, and beliefs like, we're not the kind of people who succeed or something bad always happens. Sound familiar? Yeah, well, me too. Okay, so let me try to give you like a real example of how this plays out. So I'm going to use a composite story here, but see if anything resonates. Let's say your great-grandfather lived through the Great Depression. He experienced real hunger, real scarcity, real fear that his family wouldn't survive. So he learned to save everything, trust no one, and never ever show vulnerability because vulnerability meant danger. He raised your grandfather with those same values, but your grandfather didn't live through the Depression. He just inherited the fear. Maybe he became extremely controlling about money, even when there was plenty. Maybe you struggled to express love because showing emotion felt dangerous. Then your grandfather raised your mom or dad with those same patterns. And now you're sitting here maybe with a good job and money in the bank, but you feel guilty every time you spend money on yourself. Or maybe you can't quite believe good things will last. Or maybe you shut down emotionally when you're stressed because, well, that's what everyone in your family does. The original trauma, the depression, happened almost a century ago, but it's still running your life in ways you might not even recognize. And here's what's really wild. This doesn't just happen with big historical events. It happens with personal traumas too. A parent who was abandoned might become overprotective, raising kids who don't learn independence. Someone who was criticized constantly might become a perfectionist, raising kids who never feel good enough. Someone who was betrayed might struggle with trust, raising kids who have trouble forming close relationships. So you see, the trauma shape shifts as it moves through generations, but the core wound stays the same. So how do you even begin to untangle this stuff? How do you figure out what's yours and what you inherited? Well, the first step is awareness, and that's honestly the hardest part because these patterns feel like just who I am or just how my family is. They're in the background, invisible, like the operating system running behind everything else. So here are some questions that might help. What patterns repeat in your family? Look at relationships, mental health, money, success, how conflict is handled. If 3 generations struggle with the same thing, well, that's a clue. What stories does your family tell? Every family has narratives. We're survivors. We don't trust outsiders. Nothing ever goes right for us. These stories shape how you see yourself and what you think is possible. What topics are off limits? The things your family never talks about often point directly to the trauma. Maybe no one mentions your grandfather's alcoholism or your aunt who left the family or what really happened in the old country. What do you overreact to when your response to something seems way bigger than the situation warrants? There's often a trauma response. Your nervous system is reacting not to just what's happening now, but to echoes of what happened before. And what beliefs do you hold that don't actually match your experience? Like believing you'll end up homeless even though you've never been close to it, or believing you're unlovable even though people love you. Those beliefs usually come from somewhere else. One thing that helps is literally drawing your family tree and marking patterns, like who struggled with addiction, who had difficult relationships, who dealt with mental health issues. And you start to see the threads connecting across generations. And just be gentle with yourself as you do this. You're not doing it to blame your family or to wallow in victimhood. You're doing it to understand. And understanding is the first step toward freedom. All right, so here's the part you've been waiting for. How do you actually heal this stuff? I'm not going to lie to you. It's not a quick fix. You're unwinding patterns that have been building for decades and maybe longer. But it is absolutely possible. And every step you take breaks the chain a little more. So first, therapy or counseling. And honestly, this work is hard to do alone. So a good therapist, especially one trained in trauma or family systems therapy, can help you see patterns you can't see yourself, and they can hold space for the grief that comes up when you realize how much pain has been passed down. And they can teach you new tools for regulating your nervous system and responding to stress. Second, educate yourself. Learn about your family's history. If they lived through war or poverty or oppression, understand what that actually meant. Context helps. When you understand why someone developed certain coping mechanisms, it's easier to have compassion for them and for yourself. Third, feel your feelings. This is huge. Generational trauma, it often persists because feelings were never processed. They got buried, denied, numb. Your job is to actually feel them, the grief, the anger, the fear, and let them move through you instead of storing them to pass on. Fourth, develop new patterns. This is where the rubber meets the road. If your family avoids conflict, you practice healthy communication. If your family is emotionally distant, you practice vulnerability. And it's going to feel weird and scary at first. Your nervous system is going to scream that you're doing it wrong because it doesn't match the familiar pattern. Do it anyway. Okay? Fifth, break the silence. When appropriate, talk about these things, not to attack or blame, but to acknowledge, hey, I've been thinking about how anxiety runs in our family, and I'm working on understanding why. Sometimes just naming the pattern weakens its power. And sixth, reparent yourself. Give yourself what earlier generations didn't get. If they didn't get safety, create safety for yourself. If they didn't get unconditional love, practice self-compassion. And here's something important. Healing doesn't mean you forget your history or reject your family. It means you honor the survival mechanisms that got your ancestors through hell, and then you gently set them down because you don't need them anymore. Here's the beautiful thing about doing this work. You're not just healing yourself. When you break a generational pattern, you create a new legacy. Your kids, if you have them, won't inherit that particular wound. Your nieces and nephews, your community, they all benefit from the healing work you do. And sometimes something amazing happens. Sometimes when you start healing, other family members notice, and your openness gives them permission to do their own work. Your willingness to talk about hard things creates space for others to open up. And even if that doesn't happen, even if your family never acknowledges the patterns or joins you in the work, you still did it. You still broke the chain. And that matters enormously. Think about your ancestors who survived impossible things. They did that so you could be here. And now you're doing the work so that future generations can be free. And that is powerful stuff. And look, I know this topic is a little heavy. And if you're sitting there feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. You don't have to heal everything all at once. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just start where you are. Maybe that's just noticing a pattern. Maybe it's making a therapy appointment. Maybe it's having one honest conversation with someone you trust. Every single step matters. Every time you choose a different response than the one you inherited, you're rewriting the story. Every time you feel a feeling, instead of numbing it, you're breaking the cycle. Every time you extend compassion to yourself and your family, you're creating healing. You are not doomed to repeat your family's patterns. You have the power to choose something different. And yeah, it's hard work, but you're strong enough to do hard things. Your ancestors proved that. So be patient with yourself, be brave, and know that the work you're doing matters, not just for you, but for everyone who comes after. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening today. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And please hit that follow button. And remember, healing is always possible. So take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you guys next time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.